To episode 101. Nick Candito, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Randy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely psyched to have you. Should be fantastic. I'm coming to you from the Waldorf in Dana Point, California. I'm attending the Alexander Group has a executive, I guess their annual executive forum, which should be really good, and lots of great folks here. Hopefully, I can do drum up some prospects for Sales Bricks. Uh, anyway, so we've got SalesBricks as our sponsor. You hear more about them later, but awesome niche company in the whole CPQ, config price quote space. Nick is an investor, so certainly knows a lot about it. They're also a sponsor of Sales Community, so we'll be at a tag team telling you some great things about SalesBricks, who's our sponsor today. And always brought to you by Sales Community. For those that are members, great. For those that are not, you can go to salescommunity.com and click on the fall free link in the upper left hand corner and get a free membership. You can post that here on the site if you could, please. So we're trying to figure out, I've known Nick, I think about 8 or 9 years. There's a startup company called Relate IQ that Bill Campbell got me into, so helped for a little bit, unfortunately not long enough because they got picked up by Salesforce. But at the time, Nick was on 8 or 9 years ago. It doesn't seem that long ago, but yeah, definitely was already a rising star for sure, and have kept in touch. Know him to be an authentic person, definitely family centric, and very very passionate about helping his companies. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but also am a happy investor in his Angel Collective Opportunity Fund. So I know you got to watch SEC rules and things like that. If you want, Tucker can maybe look up and post the link if you want for that. And then I've got some other good comments from some of your portfolio companies. Evan Long, who's a co-founder and CEO of Product Signals, says about Nick. Nick has the acute ability to help entrepreneurs navigate their 10,000-foot view strategy all the way down to operational tactics. As an investor and advisor in Product Signals, he's been an amazing partner and a true champion for our vision. Any company would be super lucky to have him in their corner. So pretty good there. And then John Festejo, who's a co-founder and CEO at SalesBricks, says Nick is a hands-on angel investor that is well connected in the Valley and focused on helping aspiring entrepreneurs find other investors that understand the problem the entrepreneurs are solving. Nick has helped the SalesBricks founders and team find amazing investors like Randy Seidel, Adam Aarons. Adam's a former CRO that took Okta public, and others that have been instrumental in the early stage of SalesBricks. Any company that has Nick as well as brother Connor, shout out to Connor, are lucky companies for sure. And John also mentioned he worked with Connor at Signal FX. So maybe you might want to post those on your site. They're pretty good testimonials.
I'm going to ask, yeah, they're going to have to repeat those publicly. Hopefully they'd be comfortable doing that, but appreciate the kind words.
Absolutely. Well, it's already public here because we had LinkedIn Live going. And
There we go.
for those watching, as always, you can see us or hear us. We cannot see you, but feel free to post any comments or any questions. And then we have Tucker is always doing a great job behind the scenes, and he will pull those up for us. So also just by way of background, you recently moved from the Bay Area to Austin. Still doing a little back and forth, but I know that's always challenging with the family. And for interests besides work, there's a really cool organization called Think Together, which stands for Teaching, Helping, Inspiring, and Nurturing Kids. So very, very cool. Always important to give back. And obviously, I know you're have a big focus in your family. Terrible golfer, podcast, training, kind of all things like that. So if we jump
I'm
into
allowed to make that joke. You're not allowed to make that joke.
okay, sorry. And we also got some good time this summer on the Cape too, so it's certainly great meeting up that way. And we got a little story thing about that later on toward the end. So let's jump into the questions, so we can help you share some of your incredible insights with the audience. So maybe start off talking about your professional background, and I always find it interesting. People maybe start with also kind of what your first job was.
Yeah, that's a great one. So thanks again. I'm excited to be on here. A lot of overlap with the work you do, Randy, and companies I'm involved with. I saw you had Carl Eschenbach from Sequoia on. I sent him a text saying tough act to follow, and he just hit me back with an LOL. So I'll try to do my best to be as insightful as someone like Carl. So I
Very good.
studied finance in school, and then had someone who's a board member of my college, David Byrne, who's become a mentor, kind of pushed me to think about technology. So I was really just fortunate and kind of stumbled into what was a technology startup, small team of less than a dozen people, that was trying to build a product, basically a database to manage clinical trial information. It was a job I probably shouldn't have had. A lot of technical concepts, a lot of product management, a lot of traveling on the road to meet with customers, doing sales, really just kind of getting to understand the inner workings of a cloud-based software business. And that kind of gave me the itch, I think, entrepreneurially to think about, software as a business model and the opportunity with cloud. So it was a bootstrap company. I worked with a lot of smart people. I learned, that I wanted to have equity upside in whatever I was doing. So, it was a good opportunity to cut my teeth. And then out of the first 4 startups I did, that was the only one that, wasn't eventually acquired. So I did 2 companies in the Boston area. RelateIQ was my first company in Silicon Valley. Really appreciated Steve Laughlin and Adam Evans and Steve Hickey and the founders of that business bringing me out to the Valley to work. And, I tried to just, really put my shoulder into kind of anything that they gave me. So RelateIQ was a quick win. Spun that into being a founder and CEO of a business that we sold to Box in 2018. And since then, I've kind of played the line between investing and operating. But I really have a passion for building companies and teams and everything that goes into that, which is sometimes good, bad, and ugly.
That's great. And it was a progressly. So congratulations. That certainly was good. So funny side story. Obviously, I'm a little bit older than you, but graduated BC 1985. So we started at this. A handful of us friends started this startup called EMC, and we had these things called stock options. And believe it or not, at the time, nobody had a clue what they were. You got it? I'm like, yeah, whatever, blah blah blah. And it just amazing. And obviously, you quickly once you IPO, then you've kind of figured it out. But it's just amazing. You think from then where nobody had a clue to now, I think like high school kids are all wondering, okay, what do you have for stock options? Let alone college kids getting their first job. But yeah, definitely sign of the times and a little different, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm yet to do the IPO ride, but it's certainly on my professional bucket list. Keeps me going, and it's exceptional when you can find one of those companies that gets everything right, product, market, team.
Yeah.
So hopefully it'll be there. I haven't felt the full effect of that yet, but yeah, that story from EMC that I heard from Peter as well is certainly a good one.
Yeah, and then we actually even had one where they had canceled the club trip one year, and we got whatever number of shares. And I remember mine. I wrote to Roger Marino, or a lot of us work for. Roger, this is useless, and I was like, so kept them. And then fast forward, it ended up being worth, I forgot, some ridiculous amount of money. So I had to say sorry. But anyway, so moving on here. So I know you got your hands in a lot of cookie jars, but I think kind of your primary is an Angel Collective Opportunity Fund, which I said before. I'm a proud and happy investor, and even in these times, don't know. I'll let you speak to what you're allowed to say or not say about the returns, but maybe talk about what your role is there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as part of that journey after founding and exiting a business, trying to think through, reinventing myself, I invested in a number of companies personally, and started to kind of LP into small funds where, it's a geographic location that, I wasn't going to cover, I wasn't going to be the smartest investor. And, something like, crypto, for example, and I know that's probably a hot topic right now. So really fortunate to have a concept there, with my co-founder Sunil Pai, who was most recently at AngelList, where we felt like we could build a platform to select some of these solo capitalist folks that are managing small funds, give them a dedicated opportunity fund, and then they use that to kind of double down into their best companies. So we've worked with 6 exceptional managers, folks that that are kind of household names, Anthony Pompliano, Sriram Krishnan. And we've worked with a number of large family offices that struggle with this kind of emerging manager problem. So for me, it's been a great decision working with Sunil. We just passed 50 investments, spent time with some of the family offices, but it's got some built-in advantages in terms of the portfolio companies that our managers have, and the fact that they're somewhat capital constrained when a business works. So it's been awesome. I hope it's the type of thing I can do for a long time and kind of think of it as a legacy play. But obviously, job number one is making sure the portfolio looks good. So it's been helpful right now to be more active with existing companies, especially the ones that are doing better than maybe the broader market knows, because they're not out fundraising, because there are some macro challenges. But yeah, it's been a really fun project on Fund 3, and really just proud of the kind of team and results that we have so far, although there's a lot more work to do.
So round numbers, the current kind of all-in portfolio of the fund is about 50 companies?
Yeah, we just passed 50 companies, worked with 4 managers last year, this year, working on the group for 2023. And it's covered, AI, B2B SaaS, some consumer, crypto. But basically each manager kind of has their core focus, and they do a good job of helping us to stay top of mind with the founders to ideally help them take more capital when it's right for their business.
That's great. And then typically you're a minority position, not a majority position, correct?
Yeah, that's right. We're not leading rounds. We do facilitate a lot of introductions. If our managers are inception stage, we describe ourselves as like inflection. So right when the business is starting to really work and doing better than people realize. So yeah, we're comfortable coming in and then kind of helping to make intros that facilitate the next round of financing. So it's a good way to kind of fit into the ecosystem as something that's collaborative but not competitive with any of the large funds, that we'd hope to have involved in any of our businesses.
Yeah, and I know from direct feedback, and I'm sure you agree, but you're probably provide a lot more value as a minority investor than some of the majority investors actually that are involved. So I'm sure that gets you fantastic access to some super competitive deals as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's kind of the exact thinking. There's definitely a Coach Campbell line in there where, he had a no cash, no equity, no bullshit kind of line about his companies, which meant he'd be in the room, but he wanted to make sure he could know what was actually going on in the business versus everything being dressed up. So I feel like there's a bit of that too. Like you want to be a founder's first phone call, and as a career founder startup person, you're somewhat battle tested. There's always something that's not right in these businesses. So instead of hiding those things, you want to be someone that can actually get the phone call and lean into help. So yeah, that's exactly right. Like, you want every business to go straight to the moon. That's just not the reality of how it typically works. And startups don't fail, founders give up, is something that I think I've learned the hard way.
Yeah, and that's speaking of Bill Campbell. Any lesson learned from him? I was fortunate to have him as a mentor for a few years, which was fantastic. And for those that don't know, Silicon Valley legend, was a mentor to the kind of who's who of Steve Jobs, Google, a bunch of others. And what was the book is what's it called?
$1 Trillion Coach.
The $1 Trillion Coach. So if anybody hasn't seen it, it's a super easy read. And as an aside, there's one part where Phil Schiller, who's a longtime Apple exec, great guy, talks about going to Mary Ann's, which is a dive bar by BC. So Peter Bell, Jay Hogue, I was there, John Clavin. So some folks you probably know. So that's my claim to fame.
Yeah, and Jonathan Rosenberg and his son Josh, they're friends, and was fortunate to be able to spend some time with them. But just so many lessons in there. I think I try to play that line quite a bit with companies that I work with. We're like, I really do care about the people, but also sometimes feedback's a gift. Even before we started this call, you're giving me feedback on things right away. I just think it's got to be everyone's kind of posture and demeanor. And when people tell you something, it's because they want to see you do better. It's not because you want to be defensive. And the first time I met Bill was when I was on a recruiting trip to join Relate IQ. And then I remember he came in for a board meeting, and my mom had sent me flowers. I had a vase of, I think, white roses on my desk first time Bill came in, and I was an employee of the company. So that was definitely terrifying. And he was always incredibly generous and helpful, and spend a bunch of time with them, outside of work things, going to events and concerts and tailgates and stuff like that. But I just think that that's really what matters, right? Is you care about the people, but ultimately it's a team sport, and you should all be seeing the problems the same way. It's just everyone's name is going to be on a different class of things. So yeah, it was really, really a cool opportunity to work with him and kind of see his ability to help get everyone rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, and obviously tons of sayings and things that he would talk about, but I think he'd be very proud with how you've progressed. And I'm just thinking to myself in particular, he used to talk about, he's like, hey, great thing about you and Peter, you guys get your fingernails dirty, you get in the weeds, you know the details, you know what's going on. So, you likewise as an investor in what you're doing, you exude that as well. So congratulations on that front, and certainly much more. So maybe talk about, I was going to ask about kind of how you pick winning companies, but maybe kind of weave that into maybe a flat file who's in the, simplifying the data onboarding space, and product signals who does the autonomous product feedback. So maybe kind of weave some of that in with those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Both of those, I think, are perfect examples. With Flatfile, known one of the co-founders, Eric Crane, for over a decade, worked together in Boston before we really knew much of anything. But we were trying to help a company be successful that was eventually, acquired early 2021, and at that point known as Brandwatch. And his co-founder, David Boscovich, they worked together at Envoy and built a data import API. So knowing the founders, trusting them, and then they already have a product that has customers, I think that's a relatively easy decision. I think a bunch of firms sometimes talk themselves out of those things because there's a TAM analysis, total addressable market, that is not visible today, but great founders always find a way to increase their market and build their next product and do more for their customers. So I was fortunate to be involved early there, and just really proud of how those two have stuck together and built the business. I think it truly is like an indispensable problem for any company to solve. How do you get data into your application that you're building, any technology focused company? And then it was very similar with product signals. Had 10 customers. Any business you've ever been in, they struggle with product feedback. What do customers need? I think a lot of that comes from the field, from sales calls, from talking to your existing customers. So just the ability to gather a lot of those insights, kind of the metadata around product feedback, similar to how we thought about sales data with RelateIQ, I think is a big unaddressed problem. I think people go way deep into the project management execution of the feedback, but actually just having that crystal ball around, what all your customers, hundreds, eventually thousands of customers want at any given point in time, is really interesting. So for me, those are easy ones. I think when, you like the founders, you've felt the problem, and then they already have a product built that has customers. It's a bit more challenging when it's, two founders and a slide deck. And at that point, you're kind of in the wilderness for a bit longer, figuring out what levers you can turn to help the business.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the cool thing I think with product signals is, and I'm biased from a sales or go-to-market side, but too often engineering, may or may, I'll say gets the feedback, but they're kind of blind to it, and so they have their product roadmap, that's what they want to do, and sales really doesn't have a good opportunity to kind of give that feedback. So like back in the I'll say back in the old days at EMC, I mean, sales was very tied in with engineering. That's the way Dick and Roger had it. Engineers would go on sales calls. There's kind of a strong mutual respect. But I think these days more and more engineering's kind of on their own. They really don't respect sales. They really don't go on sales calls. So the salespeople are sitting here saying, yeah, I'm trying to sell this. Customers want that. And all we got to do is tweak it. And by the way, I've been hearing this feedback for a while. If you listen to me 6 months ago, we could have that feature ready now. So it almost kind of is a great way to kind of memorialize or put in writing kind of the feedback that sales is hearing, and then you're able to kind of see what happens. Because how often is it that the shit hits the fan, board says, okay, we're missing our numbers, they don't want to shoot the CEO says, yeah, it's a CRO, and the CRO is like, well, hey, I'm struggling with this whole product market fit, we don't have this, we don't have that, oh, you're just not selling, right? So I think it could be almost I think I was joking with Evan, it could be almost like a CRO lifeline for their jobs, right? I mean, how's that for value prop?
Yeah, I think that's that's totally right. And I've also used the Diane Green line a couple times, who Ben Hortz described as like godlike CEO, where, what you say to the sales team is, why do we need you? Look at how great the product is. What you say to the product team is, look at the sales
Yeah.
teams closing all these deals, making sure we can all get paid. But I think you kind of need that, you need that
Balance.
balance and that tension on the
Yep.
line where, it takes a bunch of different skill sets, and, software is really just a complex team sport. So totally agree. Like, your customer has the insight, has the truth. You're never going to be smarter than your customers, but how do you go execute on that, feedback in that direction? That's how these iconic companies are built. And Adam Aarons is a close buddy and someone I've learned a lot from, but like, where you start and where you grow these businesses is pretty exceptional if you're in the field listening to customers and letting everyone play to their strengths. So definitely seen a number of companies get that wrong, where someone thinks they have like a universal insight, where it's actually much more about the engine of how do you listen and execute on these things for your customers.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to kind of pivot. There's a bunch we can talk about in terms of how you look at your companies, everything else, but I think let's focus here for now. So our title topic is the white space between PLG and enterprise selling, and the chasm that can kill your company. So great topic. Never nobody's brought that up before in our 100 plus that we've done. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a hot topic, and I really like the literature that came from Menlo and Naomi specifically on PLG. And I feel like, what I see and hear from founders and, talk to a lot of them is, they think they're either a PLG company or an enterprise business, and there's nothing in between. And I think it's really seductive to think through customers that will pay you $1 million. Instabase is a company that I'm involved with personally, and they were able to do that with several customers. Not to share anything too sensitive, but that's very, very hard to do. And there's maybe public company examples like Viva where the founders had the network to go do that. And then I think every technologist founder, imagine if you have classic CTO and product focused founders, they want to be a PLG company, right? They want to go be the next Stripe. But I think a lot of companies forget, it really is kind of more of like a hand-to-hand kind of problem that you need to solve for your first 10 customers. Like you need to really, make sure the product works, take it on yourself to go get it implemented, ensure that they're seeing ongoing value in the product. So I think I've just seen a lot of companies, zero product, zero customers, and they want to be PLG. Well, the reality is like you're going to have to go find those customers, do the work for them, ensure that they're successful, and then over time, you might have the opportunity to kind of build into the enterprise. But there's just a lot of nuance and subtlety, I think, really based on the stage of the company, that a lot of folks are missing. Because the reality is, to build a great company, you're going to need the best product, good marketing, and probably exceptional go-to-market, right? Which means everything that goes into how you think about predictably finding, acquiring, and then making a customer successful. So I think there's a lot there that gets bucketed kind of as a false dichotomy. But the reality is, different phases of your company are going to require you to lead with different strengths. And even when you think about additional products coming to market, if you go from being a single product company to a multi-product company, saw that evolution inside a place like Box as well. It's different, and you need to repeat the cycle, right? Where it's going to be relationship dependent, it's going to be heavy on you versus the customer, and then maybe you have a product-led motion over time, but it almost never starts that way. And I think if that's your initial goal in founding a company, it's going to be hard for you to get the feedback that you need to go build the best product in market.
Yeah, product signals could help.
Right.
And then, so speaking about that, so the early on, right? So that product market, if you don't have product market fit, you don't have a company. So what are some maybe best practices you've seen? What are some mistakes that you've seen around kind of determining product market fit?
Yeah, I think founders uniquely own product market fit. There's another good from Doug Leone, where it's like we can help with everything else, and like as founders you need to go find the product market fit, right? And I think what what gets lost in that journey for product market fit is you're trying to find the biggest unsolved problem that doesn't have incredibly complex product requirements, right? And you need to figure out, what does that product look like? Where do those customers live? How do you get those customers to trust you? And then how do you do the work of proving that you've actually built something that solves that problem? So I think where I've seen companies go wrong with that, you cannot delegate product market fit. You cannot take on incredible product complexity before you have any customers. And ultimately, you need to understand that your first, end customers, I don't know if it's 10, I don't know if it's 100, depends on the type of product and the price point of that product. They're going to expect you to do more for them over time, right? So you really want to optimize for like, how do you get in the door for those customers? And picking great customers means, they're going to help you define the market together, which is how do you grow the addressable opportunity. So I think it's kind of a unique combination of sometimes any of those three things or all of those three things going wrong. And it just makes it that much harder to get through that, kind of initial product market fit phase where it's your first few customers, it's the simplest version of the product, and it's the segment of the market that you feel like you can get to, predictably. And that could be based on network. There's a bunch of different factors that go into where do you start.
Yeah. And when you had, I don't know I'm not asking the question on the answer, but on SalesBricks, when you first got involved, where were they on that product market fit journey?
I think John's a great example of like what I think you can do to kind of shortcut this a bit. Flatfile is a good example. Product Signal is a good example. So SalesBricks, like if you're building a product for yourself, it takes way fewer conversations for you to know what is the insight and what was the biggest problem that you had that, is currently unsolved. So I would say they had built a very impressive product very quickly. And, I was kind of blown away and surprised by the talent of JL, who's the CTO of that business, but John was the initial buyer, right? So if you're going to go build a product for yourself, it should be a great product. You're going to use the product. You're going to have insights around, what you need this to do that no other competitor market could do. And you probably have, 5, 10, 25 friends that you've worked with in similar roles where you can go tap them on the shoulder to go be your first, basket of flagship customers. So that they were pretty far along the path, did not have revenue, but knew exactly what they wanted to build, had a good product and market, and needed to just go get in the field to make those customers successful.
Oh, awesome. And then obviously on the product market fit side, as things progress, there's a lot of other things then that are, I assume, kind of critical on your kind of metrics as you look at your companies, right?
Yeah, personally, we're oftentimes investing before there's a ton of traction. And I do think I have a friend who describes angel investing as like, the level of trust you'll have in your network. If someone has worked with someone
Right.
and they think they're great, you need to get what they're doing. You need to feel like they have a reasonable approach. You hope there's other folks investing so they have enough time to figure it out. But yeah, when you're starting early, you gotta coach through and ride through, the period where there's not a ton to evaluate. And I think that's what is somewhat seductive about investing in innovation and being a venture investor, right? Is like, if you've seen it enough, you can pattern match, choose a product. I like the idea of getting behind those because I can see it, feel it, touch it, and have like more constructive feedback to give as an investor. But yeah, it's a bit different when you're coming in early. And there's a Navalism too, where it's like anyone who comes before me is throwing darts. Anyone who comes after me is like, a spreadsheet monkey. There's some truth to that, based on where you come in, because everyone sees the opportunity a bit different based on what they can evaluate.
Yeah, for sure. Now, what about we're kind of in an economic downturn of sorts, depending whatever words you want to say. So, how do you feel about the importance of go-to-market in this type of environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think any company of reasonable scale, especially if they're charging like a more premium price point, which is somewhere on the spectrum to enterprise, you need to assume your customers are thinking about, cutting costs and saving on anything that they don't need to spend on. So it's critical to have relationships with your customers, first and foremost. The second thing is it's critical for them to feel like they can confide in you and they can trust you around their next class of business problems. It's always better to solve a critical problem and have the opportunity to do more for them over time. But I think a lot of it comes down to not just features and functions of your product, but use cases and what's the impact on their business. So you need to not just have that conversation when you're selling. You need to have that conversation, on a regular basis once they've implemented the product and it's working. Having this kind of more strategic conversation around what else can we do, and where would be the biggest impact to make in your business. And I think, as an executive, you want to work with vendors where they're seeing like the bigger picture. You feel like they understand your business. So if you're not using anything and there's like a single use case or a problem they feel like they can solve themselves in-house or with a cheaper competitor, you're in a really tough spot right now. So I think it's more critical than ever to kind of be hands-on with your customers and see the opportunity to be a strategic partner for them and ideally solve more than one business problem based on the value you sold them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I put that around that, as you just said, on the whole kind of value side, right? So I always say if you are in an elevator with the CFO and they either just bought something as a current or a current customer are going to buy, what are you going to say? And it's not all the techno mumbo jumbo. It's, kind of how you're going to help them generate revenue, save money, get a competitive advantage. Maybe there's some compliance, but, bells and whistles. And, too often, sales teams, still don't nail that, although it's a concept that's been around for whatever, 20, 30 years. It's crazy. Let's see here. So moving on, what about examples of sales leaders that you respect and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think any founder that is like really taking the feedback to heart on that initial product market fit, where you're doing founder selling, I think that's probably the hardest kind of selling you can do, right? Because there's a gray area between what the product does and what you want the product to do, and oftentimes you're selling and then building. But I think that's ultimately where the magic happens. That's why founders know the problem so well. So I think any founder who is like, really doing the selling and doing the hands-on customer development, I think that's the first thing I admire. I've learned a lot from folks like you and Adam Aarons, who, took Okta from, sub $1 million all the way through IPO. I remember grabbing breakfast with Adam the day he announced that he was leaving Okta. To see people build loyalty like that and scale organizations like you and him has done, that's incredibly impressive. And then, Peter Bell is someone I see as a mentor who's in a sales role at EMC with you. Had him come in and talk to the company relatively often about, what does it mean to be in sales and listening to customer feedback, and then how you just need your first, however many customers really love what you're doing to be along for the ride as you think about where you take the product. So I think I've learned a lot from a bunch of different sales leaders. John Turner, someone who I worked with on the board of Think Together, that was at Chronicle for a while and had taken TriNet public. So I feel like I have a good kind of group of sales folks, go-to-market folks, bunch of different business models, bunch of different spaces. But the connective tissue is always that it comes down to like, prioritizing the customer and then the team that you can put around you, and finding people who can really care and put their ego aside. So I feel very fortunate there that I got a good group of folks that I've learned from.
Yeah. And do you have a point of view on, I'll say, go-to-market type founders, like say you and I would be, versus kind of engineering only go-to-market founders who would be kind of less kind of sales centric?
Yeah, I mean, there's there, right, where it's like, everyone thinks they can market, and then like folks that, can't build the product, they're not designers. David, the CEO of Flatfile, likes to joke with me, about ability to lead design and help Flatfile with design, because it, clearly you either have the skill set or you don't. So I think there's every technology first company needs a product, and I think that's typically the skill set of the founders. I think the ones that have, a founder around the table who knows how to think about, strategy, ops, go to market, they tend to be able to have every part of that conversation be represented the fastest. But I also think there's something to be said about the feedback loop with like strictly technical founders that know how to kind of see each other's strengths and then just trust what maybe others are getting for observations. So I think I still believe in kind of founding teams of two where there's that perfect balance between tech and business, but I do think the overlap there is in product. And I used to be a lot closer to making product decisions, but everything you think about in a technology company needs to be kind of product centric, and I think that allows you to get the right product strategy right. That allows you to build the go to market in support of the product strategy. So it ultimately comes back to like the skill set of the technical team, and I view that as kind of the talent in a lot of these businesses.
Awesome. Really cool here. And then you've been talking a lot about the mentors and certain some great folks, but what about any specific feedback that you've received?
Yeah,
and it could be in different stages, right? So now as a investor, different than maybe kind of when you're an operator.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to frame it. I think in coming up through the ranks as an operator, before I was a founder, you really want to become kind of indispensable to the team and company that you're working with, and a lot of that is like trying to see problems before they become issues for the business, and ultimately not requiring much management, right? I think that's the best place to be as a startup operator. Is quick one-on-one, you're prioritizing the right way, you're solving problems, and it's almost like the team runs in the background without creating any additional work for the folks that are kind of up the management layer. I think as a founder and CEO, everything falls on you as a CEO. There's no problem in the business that you can say you don't know about. You can't say someone else owns that. Like at the end of the day, like it's kind of your baby. And I think that's overwhelming, and startups do take over your life, like Paul Graham says. So I've certainly felt that. And now as an investor, I think it's easy to talk yourself out of opportunities because there is something that's not yet figured out, or you're not being a follower if you come in early because maybe there's not like a top tier investor already involved that you can intellectually say is smarter than you, or they have more resources to help the company be successful. So I think it's sometimes hard juggling the different types of feedback. Mentors, any good mentor, yourself included, gives very clear feedback very often, probably more often than you want the feedback. So I've gotten a lot of it. Some of it's challenging to swallow, but I think also being mindful of like what's your next hill to climb in life or professionally. That it's been really helpful for me and eye-opening, and just got to do the work on trying to figure those things out before they become big issues in your life or your business.
Yeah, for sure. So then what about advice you'd give your younger self?
Probably something in patience. My wife would joke about that. I'm probably not the most patient person. And I think it, felt like it took me, forever to get to the point where I was the founder of a business. And then there were even things there where, I probably went too fast and, could have done a number of things differently. So I think, thinking very deliberately about relationships and opportunities. You always think you're going to have kind of your next opportunity, or there's more relationships that you can get introduced to. So I've tried to, now be much more relationship focused, much more patient. And it's tough to balance that with kind of the founder DNA where, it keeps you up at night if there's a problem that you feel like you can solve. So I see that in a lot of folks that I work with now, early stage founders, really hard charging. But they also need to be mindful of kind of the bigger picture and the folks that they're working with along the way. So it's hard to give yourself feedback because I'm hoping that I took a lot of it, but I still think a lot of those thoughts every day around, kind of patience and relationships.
Yeah, that's great. And just as a reminder for those watching or listening, feel free to chime in with any comments or any questions. Nick Candito here with Angel Collective Opportunity Fund. Definitely lots of fantastic insights. So what about the kind of importance now of what you see as kind of sales ops or rev ops and that function that I know you know a lot about?
Yeah, so I kind of came up through the ranks in, sales ops, implementing things like Salesforce and doing the reporting and like running the forecast meetings and eventually tying that into like how we're doing product planning. So I would say as soon as you get past that initial product market fit phase, critically important. I think it's critical for those functions to be embedded in the line of business. You can typically, I've seen one example of it in my career where someone can do ops across entire go to market, marketing, sales, post sales, but typically you need kind of your ops folks to be thinking through the strategy, what you're measuring, how you're optimizing. You need those folks to like be tied to the management and the feedback cycles within folks that are doing those individual jobs. So I think there's a lot of exciting tools there now. There's never been an easier way to stay informed if you're leading a team. Things like Gong, where you can jump in calls and listen to insights and put it on 2 or 3x just to kind of go like hear what's coming from the field. It just gives you a really unique ability, I think, to kind of tie in ops to every conversation and reinforce the way that you're building teams and running the company. So excited about the innovation there and hope there's more of it, right? Because I think there's so much that can be measured. It's important for leaders to kind of know what they're measuring, what they're reinforcing, and then how do you share that information out across the team.
Wow, that's awesome. So then that ties into SalesBricks and the whole CPQ space. So maybe talk more about them.
So it's just very hard to buy software. I have probably examples every week where there's a product you want, you've used it at another company, and you can't go buy it until you talk to sales and you get like opaque pricing, and then they send you like a longer than needed contract document. So I think a lot of these consumption based, value based businesses, they really need like a kind of a revenue automation engine, like what SalesBricks is building. And I think every company that has a large customer base, you probably need this for renewals as much as you need it for net new sales, where pricing changes, there's a bunch of new product capabilities you want folks to have access to. So I think just the ability to kind of put more information in the hands of the customer, do that in a way that's kind of data driven and selective to their use case and how they've currently leveraged the product, I think it's a big up and coming category. And I would say SalesBricks was probably the first one that I saw, leader based on where they're at in the market. But for every CRO, why make it hard for your customers to go, purchase and then implement your product? The sales cycle should not be something that gets in their way. And I think SalesBricks is an opportunity to fix that.
Yeah, and they're focused kind of only on the software space, not hardware, correct?
That's right. Yep, that's right. And one of the easier ways to think about it than I initially thought was, a company like Lever that took over your jobs page on your website. Like, think about SalesBricks taking over your pricing page, but it's a different pricing page for every customer based on, who they are, where they are, what they want to do, especially if you have a trial experience within the product. So there's really a lot they can do to kind of drive innovation that I think will make the buying process feel a lot more catered to anyone who's looking to make a purchase and they know which solutions that they want to be working with based on who's leading in a category or referrals, reviews like G2 Crowd. I just think buyers are more informed than they've ever been.
Yeah, much. They, obviously the thing of fact now, again, versus what it used to be is, buyers come into the sales process and sales cycle already probably with the ball in the 50-yard line with kind of what their point of view is, which is, far different.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And I think on the enterprise side too, to tie it back to the topic, you're not going to close a 7-figure deal with any company today if they don't have a chance to evaluate and touch and feel the product.
Right.
And that's where I think a lot of folks get lost, right? It's like there's a product piece to every sales motion, regardless of the size of the deal. So I think clearly, if you're closing a large enterprise deal, they want to talk to someone, they want to see you do some work. They're going to send a bunch of like troubleshooting and implementation work your way. That's just the nature of how those folks buy. But yeah, everything today is, it's the quality of the product, it's the magnitude of the problem that you're solving, and I think folks just need to, really do the product market fit work and then figure out what's kind of optimized for their business. But it's a maturation process for every company versus something that falls very cleanly into, one bucket or the other. And that was kind of the thinking on a topic like this today, because I think there's a lot of confusing feedback for founders that makes it harder for them to get their company off the ground.
Absolutely. It's interesting. So it's config, price, quote is CPQ, but if you think about the process, it should be config, quote, price.
That's right.
So it's kind of interesting that what this space is called. So what about any predictions for the sales tech stack space?
I think there's probably going to be more data-driven products. I think this idea of usage-based, consumption-based businesses, that's probably something that's here to stay. It's tied to your value point. So I think there's the opportunity to see best-in-class products somewhat replicated, different functional roles. I think these products will still continue to need to integrate to core systems like the HubSpots and Salesforces of the world. But I think there's probably this wave of, more tools, not less, functional-based buying decisions, and then just additional data. But the struggle that I think a lot of companies have is like how to tie that into your core ops and how you're running the team, because it's just hard for teams to know how to prioritize with so many tools in place. So being that kind of single pane of glass to figure out what each function is responsible for, how they need to prioritize, and then the inputs of data for them to be able to do that. I've made a number of decisions along those lines where I think there's just more to come in that regard to empower go-to-market teams.
Awesome. Yeah, certainly be interesting. I mean, you think back 10 years ago, I mean, you're lucky if you could have, Salesforce and LinkedIn. And then now there's, hundreds, thousands of the, tools out there. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure it's, ripe for consolidation as well.
That's right. Hopefully. And I think there will be some big winners in the space as well.
Awesome. So what about any PG Randy stories?
Yeah, I mean, the probably the best story from you over the summer was when we were hanging out doing lunch, I think after seeing one of your son's baseball games. And someone came over and asked if I was your son. I took that as a great compliment. I was going to tell people I went to Harvard, played baseball at Alabama. So it's been funny to kind of have the opportunity to learn from you while I was, deep in the weeds at Relate IQ. And I know you put a lot of folks in there, Frank Goldman and Kelly Singh Sank, and then have a chance to kind of build a relationship and have you support some of the things that I'm doing, co-invest in companies like SalesBricks and Product Signals. So yeah, I think, to tie it back to the relationship point, I've appreciated the coaching and the guidance and the friendship. And hopefully there's a lot more to do together. So there's plenty of stories I couldn't share too. We've had some good Go Team nights, but it's all just tied to the fact that none of this stuff is easy. Customers want you to solve their problem, and it's kind of incredible the amount of complexity that can get introduced when you have team challenges, market challenges, product challenges. But that's ultimately why I think company building and entrepreneurship is so rewarding, is because there's nothing in your life you'll do that's more challenging or more rewarding. And I've been fortunate to work with a number of founders that are going to be far more successful as founders and CEOs than I've ever been. So that's the cool part of the job.
All right. So I'm old enough to be your daddy.
No, well, we corrected that to whoever asked, but I took it as a compliment. Hopefully you.
That's I honored.
Sounds like you didn't, but you could have.
Yeah, I'd be happy to have you as one of my kids for sure. So
appreciate it.
All right. Well, time flies here when you're having fun. You've been fantastic. Really appreciate it. Great topics meandering around the companies and how you invest and advice, feedback, and everything else. So thanks so much. So next week we have same time on Wednesday, Stu Gold, who is the CRO of Blattner Technologies, and he also has a great background. So for those that have watched, thank you so much. Tucker posts this across all the different social medias. Thanks to SalesBricks for sponsoring. For those that are not members of Sales Community, go check it out. And most importantly, Nick, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. And by the way, stay on here while we